I literally grunt at least every 5 minutes.
Wow.
And I mean, if somebody was sitting near me, they're probably like, what in the heck is that guy doing?
This guy. This is the guy that I'm used to.
Some Yinzer's grunting the whole time up in there.
Yep, but I'm telling you.
All right.
And we're back. HUNTR Podcast.
Hey.
We're balls deep in November at this point. What episode are we on, Colty?
November
47.
11th. November 11th.
Mm-hmm. It is Veterans Day. So
yeah.
Thank you to all the vets out there.
Instagram reminded me of that this morning.
Yep, yeah. It is Veterans Day. So we appreciate everybody in their sacrifice and time to protect this country and allow us to do the things that we do. So thank you to our vets today. If you're listening to this, though, it's probably right before Thanksgiving, I'm thinking. Week before Thanksgiving. Thus why I have Jared's scariest colors on, my HUNTR orange for firearm season.
Excuse me.
Wow, it choked you up that much,
Choking on water. Dude, yeah, especially after this past weekend, man. We'll get into it here, but boy, did we run into some guys here. I was reminded of the joys of public land the other day.
Mm-hmm. It's tough, man. And yeah, so I mean, if we're listening to this, most gun seasons are opening. In fact, I'm heading to Kentucky tonight. Tomorrow, just get prepped, and then Saturday is opening day of gun season in Kentucky. It's opening day of gun season in, I think, Wisconsin. It's opening day of gun season in Indiana. I'm sure a few other states, Missouri.
Yep.
Lots of states opening. It's crazy, man, because it's one of those things we were talking about this morning. And it's like, I feel like we've just been going, but it's also because it's not like I can say, well, I'm just going to wait, a couple days and then I'll go back out. It's like, no, bow season's over. It's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. The season comes and goes quick, man. You got to make it happen when you have the opportunity.
Yep. So anyways, I'll be heading to Kentucky tonight. I spent the last week bouncing between, where the hell was I hunting? I guess Ohio.
Yeah, just Ohio.
Ohio. Yeah, in Ohio. Yeah. I did hunt in Pennsylvania. I was sitting here at the desk working during November, which is never a good thing. And like all of a sudden the stealth cams are like beep, beep, beep. I'm like, oh, what's it? And I had two shooters.
It doesn't make that noise.
It doesn't make that noise. Beep, 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 beep. I had two shooters show up behind the house on 28 acres. And it's like, if they're there, you got to go. And so I hauled ass out to the muddy box blind because it was the safest bet. Wind was swirling and stuff. And Carter ended up coming in as soon as he got out of school. He came up to the blind, and I had a decent buck up on the hill and another one sneak in on us, but neither of the two were the deer I was after, and nothing gave him a shot. So we bailed out on that.
Solid effort, though.
Yeah, solid effort.
I would have done the same thing.
Yep.
I do think you were in the right spot. I mean, if they were going to come through anywhere, I think it would have been that food plot.
They just kept pushing those does out on the edges, and it's 28 acres, and can't do much with it. And then, went and looked at a farm this week, and then went to Columbus this week as well.
Are we allowed to? You bought a farm a second, right?
I bought a farm.
Yeah. I looked at it, and I also bought it.
It sounds
got an accepted offer on it anyways.
Yeah. So actually I'm signing the sales contract this morning to lock it down, and just needed some terms and things put in. But
so at what point do you have to get an actual formal approval for financing?
It's a lot looser on the ag credit side, as long as you can bring 20% to the table.
You mean ag credit?
So
is that the bank you're
using?
That's
who I'm using.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And basically they're like, listen, as long as you can bring 20% to the table, like, we'll finance it.
And so it is for sure 20%. I know you were hoping for maybe less.
You can do 10. And we'll get into this. This is one thing that I want to talk, because we got a bunch. Did you see I was replying to a bunch of Instagram questions back and forth? So we've kind of been talking about doing like a little bit of a side podcast here of like talking about the land process and buying a farm and things like that.
It's a side podcast. It is a podcast.
Yeah. And so like I've recorded one, and it's, just because I was bored one day and just kind of talked through it. But I think we're going to get into this detail because it sounds like, oh, hey, I went and looked at a farm, and oh shit, I bought a farm. But I've been doing a shitload of research. Like, I've been really living in it, and it's an investment property. You and I have talked about how we want to invest in something that we really can enjoy and we can use.
I hate to hang up on that one.
Is he hunting?
Let me just make sure you didn't kill a buck real quick.
Okay.
Hey, just making sure you didn't kill a buck real quick. I'm on a podcast here. Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Thanks, Dad. All right, see ya.
No.
Yeah, you got to pick those calls up this time of year, though.
No buck, though.
No buck.
Okay.
He just wanted to tell me that the
tractor.
Yeah, the what are they called? The
forks.
The forks are on the tractor, so I can get that box blind out today.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, so we're gonna kind of do a side podcast here, which is very much focused on, why we want to buy land. Which to most guys listening to this are like, well, it's obvious you want to hunt, and that's true. But it's also, I'm tired of investing in paper funds that, as much as I will and want them to succeed, I have zero effect on them, being the stock market and the government and mutual funds. So I want to invest something intangibly, which in this case is land, and then with a recognized ability to improve that land and eventually sell it in a 3 to 5 year plan for more money than I bought it for, of course. But in the meantime, kind of enjoy the fruits of having a farm. So yeah, I bought a farm in Southern Ohio. Kind of excited.
How big?
130 acres.
Mm-hmm. Mainly timber with a couple.
Yep, about 10-ish acres of tillable.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. And 10-ish acres of tillable, balance in timber, has an old farmhouse on it, which is actually being rented to someone right now. So it's got income coming in. Mm-hmm. And it also has a little camp that will essentially make our cabin, for us to go down and hunt. And I'm stoked about it, though, dude. We'll get into it. I don't want to sidebar too much today, but the things that you and I have talked about from a first property, are there better deer hunting properties out there? 100%, no doubt. What I wanted to do for a first property as an investment, which is different than my Kentucky place, and we can talk about that in the podcast, but is that I wanted some extra fallback securities on the property. And so for this, it was a house that I eventually can sell or rent for income. And then also, it has a lot more mature timber than I thought. And it's maybe not to the level of, wow, this is unbelievable timber value to harvest. But, I mean, we're talking 40, 50-year-old oaks that could be harvested if I wanted them to. 100%.
Not 40 to 50.
100%.
I haven't seen it, so I guess.
Yeah.
The ones you sent me look like 20 to 30.
No, because they haven't been harvested in at least 37 years.
Then that math adds up, I guess.
Yeah. So that's as long as the family. And again, the other cool thing about this property was everything that I've researched and called on so far, which has been a lot of farms, very frequent turnover of ownership, right? Somebody goes in, they buy it, they maybe hunt it, maybe they take some timber, they sell it 3 years later, right? Mm-hmm. Which frankly is kind of what we're doing. To find something that's been in a family for a long time and then hasn't necessarily been raked over from an investment side gives, I think, more room for opportunity to make money on it than something that's maybe gone through 2 or 3 hunters, in that turnover.
Yeah,
in fact, one of the farms I looked at, Jeff Sturgis had gone and consulted on, and the guy had only owned it for 12 months and was selling it again. Those are kind of, I won't say red flags to me, but like it just doesn't leave a lot of opportunity for me to get my hands and manage it and turn it into something and then try to sell it for a profit. So
yeah, I mean, the less hands that have been in the cookie jar, the more cookies are probably in there.
Yep. And so we're in a good county. We're in Meigs County, which is a top Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young County in the state of Ohio, top 3 to 4 consistently. And I have a really good neighborhood, which was my deciding factor when I went down there and walked it. I mean, the property itself is gorgeous, but your neighbors can do a lot of harm. Mm-hmm. And I really like what I've heard from the neighbors. There's some things that could go,
we'll call them yellow flags.
Yellow flags, yeah.
They could go either way.
Public land, former game warden, but also likes to coon hunt, just those kind of things that you have to assume that they'll respect the lines. And I called the guy that I talked to, the neighboring landowner, and I said, hey, just kind of look in like this backside here. He's like, oh yeah, we don't even go up in there. Like he's like, Bob doesn't even go up in there. Like it's too thick because that's where the tornado went through. Mm-hmm. So remember how we looked at that drainage?
Dang tornado.
Yeah, you remember how we looked at that drainage that went out?
Yeah,
it's super thick. So yeah, there's a lot of upside to this thing, man. I'm excited about it. Nothing's gonna be perfect out of the gate. But it sure seems like it's got the potential to.
I think we agree.
Grow big deer.
You can't go wrong on it from an investment standpoint. The value's there.
Yep.
The only question is, what kind of deer kind of hunting comes along with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I'm encouraged by at least the last 2 years of data that they give him.
Sure. There's obviously some decent bucks there. I'd be stoked to see if you can get out there this year.
Yeah, that's the plan. Is as soon as I turn over the sales contract, that I might be taking over all the hunting rights right away.
Right on.
So yeah, but that's kind of been my week.
Well, cool. Let's jump into we got
this
Steve.
guy.
Yeah, we got Steve Sherk back on the podcast today, and they've been putting some bucks down recently.
But I think Steve's kind of echoed some of the things and frustrations you and I've had. Is that the season's been a little bit odd. Yeah. You know, it's been a lot tougher than it seems from the outside looking in.
We were just chatting on the right before we jumped on here. He's like, "Yeah, well, the weather, the moon." That I was like, "Oh, okay." Interested to hear what.
Moon.
I'm tired. Oh, I'm not. Actually, no, I'm not tired.
I don't think anybody's tired of it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting.
Oh, I mean, we put that clip out from Adam, that little red moon. Dude, that thing's on fire right now.
Sure.
No red moon, pun intended, but.
Sure. It's red hot.
But the moon isn't actually red?
It's not actually red.
That's the hardest part, though, that I'm like, why do we call it this? And it's like, oh, well, it's the harvest moon. No. Has nothing to do with that. Like, who the hell just came up with the name Red Moon?
Yeah, he's like, it's art. Get it?
All right, let's bring in Steve Sherk. What up?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good, brother. How are you?
Hey, man.
I'm doing pretty good.
Sitting on the mountain, huh?
That's exactly what I'm doing. Sitting on the mountain next to a clear cut where I have decent cell signal.
Yeah. Doing really good as you're sitting there tagged out. I know the feeling.
That is a good feeling. That I can definitely be a little more relaxed rather thinking I should be in a tree stand.
Doesn't it feel just like just relief was what I felt. Just the pressure's off and now I can have fun, which is a shame because just, the process is fun and deer hunting is fun. But once you're tagged out, it's like the weight is off your shoulders. Now I can enjoy it. And it's nice when it happens kind of early too.
Yep, and especially if you're guiding people as well, and you just feel like you have limited time and your chances are slimmer. Getting that tag filled is just such an ease off your chest.
Just other responsibilities to get to. That's the stress of deer hunting. Is like, man, the more I risk, spending time in the stand and put off these other responsibilities, the worse and worse they
just
get.
Stack up,
and
man.
So when it's like you kill November 2nd, November 3rd, it's like, whoo, got it done, and now I can address these things that I know are going to be sitting there when I'm done.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, I don't know how that feels yet this year.
Yeah, but you do know how it feels, though. It's happened before.
You've had the feeling before.
I've had the feeling,
and I've been in your shoes too. I've had those long seasons.
Well, Jared and I were just talking about it, and it obviously today's November 11th. Like, I don't feel like pressure yet, but like it's starting to encroach a little bit, especially just thinking like, all right, the gun season in Pennsylvania is not too far. Gun season in Ohio is not too far. I'll be in Kentucky for gun season this weekend. Like, you start to be like, gee, like bow season's gone. Like, it just ate up and spit out. And this year especially just I felt like I was ready for it. And I felt like I at least had a few deer on a good bead, but then all of a sudden it just fell apart quick, like really fast.
That can happen.
Yeah.
I know just what you mean. I swear this is, it's just been the strangest year for us up here as well. Like, nothing at all what I expected, just like constantly having to adapt to, things changing, and it's just been crazy.
What do you think? I've got a couple theories, and it depends where you're at. One of the big things that I kind of recognized in Pennsylvania, at least, Steve, is that, my whites and red oaks had zero mast on them. The only thing that was producing in my area was chestnut oaks.
We don't even have chestnut oak. I literally have nothing, no acorns at all.
Wow.
Apples. There's hardly any apples in a lot of places this year. So the biggest challenge, especially what I really focus on this time of year, is trying to find pockets of does. And when you don't have good food sources, it's hard to just stay on does.
That's it, man.
And just, a doe here and there, but then she might be a half mile the next day because she has nowhere to really focus on for like concentrated food source. So it's been a real challenge up here as well. The most challenging year I've actually ever seen.
Wow. That's crazy. I mean, it is, you think about these big wood bucks, and it's in a lot of cases. Jared and I were just talking about a place that I got in Southern Ohio. There's no ag anywhere, right? I mean, not on the map. I mean, at least for several miles around the area. In that area, I've got a little bit of pasture ground here and there, but I mainly rely on these big areas. And in fact, my Kentucky place is a good example on being able to pattern a hot oak tree and having doe groups within the same area, at least until middle of November. After that, it starts getting different. Didn't happen this year.
Nope. Well, I got the same situation up here, and our issue was we had a huge gypsy moth problem where they completely annihilated all the foliage on the oak trees this summer.
Wow.
I mean, in July it looked like December, like there was no leaves anywhere on the trees. So that eliminated any chance of there being acorns. In fact, I found little tiny acorns on the ground, which the trees had to drop those in order to regenerate the leaves. They got too stressed out. And so, I mean, the problem is it's usually like a 2 to 3 year cycle when this happens. And I see all these little sacks, like brown sacks on the trees where they already laid the eggs. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to have the same situation next year. I guess the only thing is I'm going to learn from, learn from this year, and I'll be way more prepared for next year, on how to hunt this kind of situation.
That's crazy, man. It is the one thing I've noticed, at least in the Kentucky side and somewhat in that Ohio area, is I was checking a camera that I forgot about near Columbus, and I pulled it, and it was like April 21st or 22nd. We had like a substantial snowfall come through, which was probably long after the buds and the flowering and everything started to happen on some of these oak trees, and I assume that dramatically affected the acorn production.
Absolutely. Yep. Frost is another big issue. So, I mean, it's just, if you don't have ag, or, you don't have your own way of, making food sources yourself, and then you're just counting on Mother Nature to provide it for you, you're going to have years like this, and those will just be the more challenging years. Doesn't mean you can't kill them though, but it's just going to be more challenging. This
is definitely the time of year that I start to get, grateful that I put in the work in the summer. Like,
yeah, for sure.
And you kind of take it for granted. Like, opening day in Ohio is September 25th or so. And then through about mid-November, it just it can work out. They can be in those clover plots and stuff, but surely those bucks that have kind of moved off and are maybe rutting elsewhere, I think late November is where that starts to pay off. It's like, oh yeah, got that brassica plot sitting there waiting for them.
Yeah.
The further you get into fall, the less food that's available in the woods. So if you still got good food in there, you're going to start drawing more and more deer in.
And you just hope that some of them made it to that point.
Steve, do you think, and I know you're running a ton of cameras, as am I, do you think that in a year like this, you stand a better chance to kill a buck that you've never seen before, because not only from the rut, but because the does are moving so much to find food that their deer ranges essentially are bigger?
Yep. I think the doe and buck range this year is way more than usual. I think the deer are a little bit shocked, like, hey, where are the acorns at? And some, I think people might be surprised, but those deer know, come this time of year in certain areas, there should be nuts on the ground. And, I think they're still probably looking for them in some places. They're used to that food source. And definitely I've seen already just from on the cameras, like I've already had pictures even in October of bucks ranging, 4 to 6 miles, which is crazy.
Holy cow.
So,
that's nuts.
That was in October.
Wow.
Yep.
I assume in the same way, it seems like they know what to do when it's not there. They've got secondary food sources, or they know places that have food typically.
Yeah, I've
seen that.
I did see some, not a lot, but I did see some beech nuts on the ground in a couple different places, which is still a good source for them as long as the turkeys don't find them first. Obviously browse, greenbrier, any kind of blackberry or rubus type stuff. I mean, but it becomes really tough when you, like Steve's saying, you look at these doe groups, which those doe groups don't want to move. They want to set up a shop, during that time of the year, and they don't want to have to move out of that area.
See, that's interesting to me because, like, so on my family farm, I've got plenty of does, and I can think of 4 or 5 distinct family doe groups. The big bucks are not there. That they've left and they're rutted elsewhere, and they've left these doe groups to like the 2-year-olds that are remaining, which is odd.
Do you think it's just because they have some sort of, hormonal communication that those doe groups aren't just going to go into estrus yet? Like, why would you leave?
No. Yeah, exactly. It's confusing. I'm sure they're in estrus, and they're probably getting bred by those 2-year-olds. I would say we probably have an abundance of, of does, just in the region.
Yeah, and there's only so many they can breed.
This is what I've learned this year, Steve. It's been really interesting as I've run cameras on multiple properties within a 15 or 20 mile radius of like my family farm in Ohio. Some bucks or some properties gain bucks like October 25th. They go there to rut. In fact, that's what happened with this buck here. And other properties seems like less dense. Even if they have food there, those properties lose bucks, and those bucks go elsewhere to rut, whether there's does there or not.
Yep. And maybe even some, I think I've seen where bucks, they have like summer range, fall range, but also in between they have like winter range or rutting areas. And sometimes you can kind of see a pattern, like a buck may have everything he needs in that area, but he just has his typical rut areas, and he'll shift. And I've seen that happen up here as well.
I think it has something to do with them wanting to push does into secluded areas, like difficult to reach.
That's true too.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Steve, I was for the last 2 weeks, I guess I've been chasing probably a 205, 210 in Ohio. And it's amazing. So I assume this deer's 5 years old this year.
Like super typical. It's just like giant.
Yeah, giant typical.
Wow.
And I'd hunted him in a planted walnut flat, basically. And so these walnuts are probably 15, maybe 20 at the most years old. And underneath is all just like privet and spice bush and like jungle, right? And so literally I'm sitting in like this empty walnut tree, in this grove of walnut trees, and these deer are like rabbits tunneling through. And what was it, the 3rd, I guess? November 3rd? When'd you shoot your buck? Second? Yeah, so November 3rd, I had him at 37 yards on a doe for like an hour and a half and could never get a shot. It was so thick. A couple nights ago, he came in chasing a doe behind me. The doe comes to 10 yards in this thick stuff. He literally would not walk through it because his antlers are so big, he just gets beat to hell. So you see, he essentially hung up outside of the thicket.
It seems like a tough spot for a buck that big.
Well, but he literally, and I know his home range is bigger. This is what's so crazy. You talk about a buck going 4 to 6 miles. In that area, that deer, I would say, lives in 150 acres. Probably 8 out of 10 times, if you scan that area, if you could see through that thicket, that deer's laying in there.
Yeah,
he's been in there every time, and it's for multiple years now.
And we think he probably did in summer there too, right? Which
I had a picture of him on September 27th. 27th.
After he's hardhorn, which I think gives some validity to that argument.
Yeah. Yep. So it's like he's literally living in there.
Have you seen that, Steve? Like they won't in the summer when their velvet is still soft. We don't see them in high stem count type of like habitat, like real briary, thick saplings and stuff. They don't move into that stuff until they've got hardhorn and they know it. Who's that?
Yep. Or you'll see him. You'll see him just on the edges. Like a lot of times, those spots will be, they'll be good food, good browsing sources, and they'll just work the edges rather than go in. But yeah, I've seen that many times.
Who is that, Jerry?
John.
Where? Which buck is that?
Don't know.
Shot a big buck?
Came all the way down near Allenston, crossed, and died on the bank.
This is the property he was hunting that 200-incher on.
Some temple.
Where'd he shoot it out?
Speak of the devil.
I don't know.
Allenston, probably. Heck yeah. Good for him, man.
Yeah. 200 maybe.
That's what you want.
There's one guy left.
Wow, John, congrats. You should let me go see if I can scrape up any leftovers,
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Anyways, but I think it's really, and I say that because I see that in my Kentucky place. In fact, I'm still hanging on the fact that it's November 11th, and I've one really good shooter on my Kentucky farm that I've seen one time. And other than that, I've seen a ton of 3 and 4-year-old bucks that are good deer, especially I want the kids to shoot whatever they want. But like, I'm just waiting. I know there's 5-year-old bucks in the area, and I know that they're covering 2-3 miles. It's just at what point are they going to actually show up on my property? And I feel like I just haven't seen them yet. And maybe it's because my does are moving around so much. Like it's a super weird year. Normally I can bet on it that the first to second week of November, if not the last week of October, I'll at least catch a mature buck coming through. I may not see him for the next 2 weeks, but that means like I'm in the game. Haven't had that this year.
Like I said, I keep saying it's been a crazy year. I just thought the way 2020 was, like, overall in life, like that, everything was supposed to be crazy in 2020, but it only seems like it's getting worse. 2021 has been more crazy. So I don't know when it's ever going to end. That's for sure.
So when did it start turning on then, Steve? You guys have put a couple bucks down, yourself included, right?
Yep. I would say just before Halloween, but it wasn't like as far as just one day it blew up. It seemed like it was a little bit gradual until around November 1st. But then last week I thought was just phenomenal, even though I don't think we killed anything last week but mine, but it was just crazy last week. But last week was more of like that cruising phase. I didn't really see any bucks. I saw some chasing, but I didn't see where it looked like a doe was in heat and they were locked on her.
And Steve, sorry to interrupt you there, but is that
okay?
Is that late for you normally then?
Yes, I usually see that phase in the last week of October.
See, that's what I was looking for, man, and I was super confused, like, which is probably one of the reasons I screwed up on that 200, because he was tending grunting versus like I'm just fired up and cruising grunting.
I don't know. It still seems very tied to these weather fronts. I mean, when they rut, they rut.
Yep.
But until that point, until the seals come in completely ripped off, it does seem to be.
Which is why this upcoming Friday through next week seems like it could be banging. There's a monster front coming through tonight.
It looks.
Yep, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Unfortunately for us, this is what happened this year. Is I started a week earlier this year because I wanted to save this coming week where I could hunt in New York. Just, it's not that I don't like guiding, but it's like you spend so much time during prime hunting weeks that's like, I want to have like a week or week or two that I can just focus on myself, not to be greedy, but we all need that. Doesn't matter what
way
your
to be
job
selfish,
is.
Steve.
Yeah. So, but it's going to backfire as far as the guiding, because normally I guide next week.
Yeah,
we're done this weekend, but I'll be hunting New York next week. Probably more scouting for the gun season, but it's going to, I used that extra week and started earlier in October, and overall, we're just going to miss a really good week, I think. But hey, at least I'll be able to be hunting now.
It is funny though, man. And Jared and I had this conversation. In fact, Jared and Colton and Corey went to Illinois on Saturday.
Yeah, if we look a little weary.
Yeah, they went on Saturday.
We've been on the road.
This was supposed to be our week that we were actually hunting in Illinois. And, basically by Saturday.
Today would have been our last day.
Yeah, Saturday, you're looking at the weather and you're like, dude, this isn't good. Like, it doesn't look good this week. And we had set the dates. This is the problem. We set the dates months in advance. You have no way to predict what the weather is going to be that week.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Here, I'll share with you real quick how this went down. So we're just looking at the second week, roughly the second week of November. We're like, hey, let's put something on the books here. We went out this summer and scouted some public land, and we have 2 80-acre leases in southern tip of Illinois. And Jeremy was going to come out and meet us a day or two after we'd gotten there, and I had a good friend from Tennessee that came up to meet us and was there with us the other day. So this was this past Saturday, like the 8th.
Yeah.
And so it's about a 10-hour drive for us. I got up at like 3:45, picked Colton up on the way, And we drove all the way out there, got there at like 12:30, did our little grocery shopping trip for the essentials, bought our license over the counter.
Yep.
And at that point, I always do, but I started feeling a little rushed. And I was like, okay,
sure.
I got to get. So Corey's been on the podcast before. Actually, Corey's the guy from Tennessee that came up to meet us. And I wanted to get Corey. This is his first big like rut trip other than at my farm. And so I had him on a piece of public where we had hung a stand this summer. And so that was the first thing. We went to this parking area. Right away, this truck like drives in. It's a dead end street and drives right past us. And I'm like, he didn't stop or anything. I'm like, okay. So I kind of walked up over the hill. I wanted to cut him off and just let him know. Say, hey, I just want to see where you're at. I don't want to mess you up or anything. So he gets to the end, turns around, and comes flying back towards us. It's like a white pickup.
Wow.
And I stopped him, and said, hey, just want to let you know. He's like, oh, man, he's a Mississippi guy. He's like, oh, I'm just looking for a spot to jump in here. I'm just trying to hunt. I'm just trying to hunt somewhere. I was like, oh, okay. Well, hey, we're up this way a bit. I've got a stand hung up there. Just wanted to let you know. He's like, okay, well, I'll see you. So he drove off, and I was like, okay, red flag.
Mm-hmm.
Corey and I finished getting ready. I walked down in with him just because it was his first time to this spot, and got down there, no stand.
Wow.
Great. I'm like, yeah, stand stolen. But the camera, we had a stealth cam running on a scrape that was right at the base.
There's an old muddy.
Yeah. If anybody had stolen this stand, we should have seen it, an old muddy. And we did.
Right.
We'd never seen that. So I was like, man, I don't know how it's possible. So I was like, well, I don't know, dude. I said, just sit here on this rock for tonight, and then we'll plan to hang this thing in the dark tomorrow morning, and then we'll go from there. I walked back, and on the way out, I come across a pile of blood, like a coagulated blood from past day or two.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right on the main access to this piece of public.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, there's 2 red flags. I get back to the truck, and I called Jeremy, who's at home or in Ohio. I was like, dude, what should we do here? I think the stand got stolen. And he's like, you need to just go and hang that stand now. Just get it done. And we remembered at that point that we actually had pulled the stand.
We set it in there and trimmed everything out, and then we pulled it because we're like, well, I don't know if we're going to come back here. And we only had a few stands with us, basically, is what it was.
Yeah.
To hang.
So it was just us. We were just stupid.
Yeah. I had no idea.
I have those same problems.
When you asked me, I'm like going back through the camera. I'm like, dude, I don't see anybody on here. Like, how would I have missed them still in the stand?
I know. Yeah. Sometimes we do stupid stuff, especially when you drive 10 hours, you get in a hurry. Yeah. I wasn't thinking.
Lack of sleep, too, will cause that,
That'll do it. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to go hang the stand again right now. Let's get it done. I'm walking back down in. So we're from 3 red flags to 2 red flags. The stand was not stolen. As I'm walking back down in, I stumble on a gut pile, big gut pile, which undoubtedly from the same deer that I found the blood from. So let's leave that at two red flags. Hung a stand for Corey, and he was good for that night. He hunted it, saw a couple small bucks, some does and stuff.
You didn't find it? Did you find a nut sack with that gut pile?
No.
Okay, I was just wondering.
No, just a gut pile. Okay, so we regrouped that night. We're good. Corey's going back to the spot in the morning. Colton and I ran out of time to hunt that night just because of the stand debacle. So the next morning it was going to be our first time. So Corey goes his way, Colton and I go our way, and I get almost to the stand with Colton, and we hear like dripping out of the stand, and I'm like, what was that? And shortly after, I realized that the thermos that I had in my pack, I hadn't put like the piece in there correctly. And so I had like at least 3/4 worth of coffee in here spilled out in my pack. I had a Tenzing lumbar pack, which I love.
Man.
Drenched. Felt my lower back. I'm like, oh, dude. And this has happened to me before. So
yeah, but
kind of a pattern.
The trip's already been
kind of a pattern. So as soon as that happens, I pull my phone out and we're starting to get settled. And I see all these texts coming in from Corey about him. First of all, there's 3 other trucks at the spot that he's parked at, and it's not like you could go anywhere from here.
It's
like
a funnel.
There's a road into this. Yeah, 3 other trucks, 2 from Alabama, 1 from Mississippi, and as he's walking in, a guy shines a green light at him, and
which is not far from.
No, he's right on. He's like 100 yards off the
main access.
The main access. He's right on. You have to get into this giant piece of public. You have to walk past that spot. And so he's walking down in there. The guy changes his light color to white and starts doing like a flag dance, and and Corey, mind you, this is Corey's first time on public land, and so I think he handled it well.
He did.
He keeps walking. He gets maybe about 60 yards from the guy, and he's like, "Are you effing kidding me?" And he's like, "Sorry, man, I'm trying to get to my stand." And he's like, "You're sorry? You're effing sorry?" And he's yelling at him, cursing him out and stuff, and
classic.
Yeah, classy. And so Corey, his stand was maybe 300-400 yards from there, so he
it wasn't like right next to the guy. I mean, he had to walk up the ditch pretty far.
He's on the very edge
of
public.
Public. Yeah, that's how it goes.
And so he gets all the way out to his stand, and I see all these text messages. I'm like, great, this is going super well. Colton and I did not see a deer that morning, nothing. And we regrouped that afternoon. I was like, I went back down in to help Corey
pull that stand.
And while we're down in there, ran into like two other guys. The one told us, he's like, yeah, we're a party of like 4 or something, and we're all down in here. He's been hunting there for like 10 years. We're like, cool. Wow. We're pulling that stand, so you guys feel free to hunt wherever. Pulled that stand, rehung it. Didn't see a deer that night either. We rehung Corey's stand somewhere else. This was Sunday at this point?
Yeah.
Yes. Sunday. And I was like, I felt, just so you know, because Jeremy and I haven't talked, I felt really bad bringing that up.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, I know, like, we put a lot of planning and we paid for a Airbnb and stuff. I was like, I don't want to pull out of this thing, but it's going south quick. Sure. And the weather looks terrible.
It's going to be 70s.
So I said, we've got 2 cruddy options here. One, we sit it out and, in my opinion, just waste the rest of the week sitting here, and we're not going to see anything. Plan B, we flip everything on its head and reschedule. We had all the stuff that had to change, and let's come home.
Mm-hmm.
Come home, and
it's the right choice, I think.
In hindsight,
I'll tell you next week.
In hindsight,
the right choice.
I think it was the right choice. So we packed everything up. Was able to cancel and get a refund on the house we were staying at, which was awesome.
Nice.
And my wife changed like some of her travel dates and stuff, and so we drove home all day Monday, and and the big overarching thing was, and I still believe this is a big factor, the weather, man. It just
you need the flexibility.
It was warm, and they were not going. It felt like September out there.
I mean, you're saying it there, Steve, and the fact that like it sucks for the guys that you're guiding, but like this week's going to be extremely tough to kill deer. Next week is going to be primo. But
exactly.
You can't predict that 4 months in advance.
Yep. What I tell people is this time of year, there's always the rut. There's going to be rutting activity, even if it was 100 degrees, but it's like putting gas on a fire. There's a little bit of flame always, but the better the weather, the bigger the flame. You're adding more gas to it. And right now I'd say the flame's pretty small, but it's going to change here in the next few days.
It was a tangible shift, even though the weather was roughly the same from southern Illinois to Pennsylvania. We just could tell. Like when we came back, it was like warm, but feels ruddy here. Well, I mean, and guys were seeing bucks. You were texting me saying
I had that mature buck come through
at noon.
My property. It was like noon or 1 o'clock.
Overlapping a red moon, roughly, kind of.
I'm not.
And
Jesus.
Yeah, so it kind of was.
Kind of was.
And so, but it was just weird, man. They just weren't going out there yet, and the weather was icing on the cake. And so, even though it seems like in the warm weather they've been going here, we got to go back next week.
It's been light though. I mean, even when I was in Columbus, which I was surrounded by bucks.
Well, I mean, look at that.
John killed one this
50
morning.
degrees is right now?
Yeah, killed one this morning. I would assume around 8:30, 9 o'clock.
Yep.
But I didn't see any deer. I didn't see that 200 until he pushed that doe in at 20 minutes before dark.
Yeah.
And I saw yesterday it was super foggy.
Yeah, but you had another big buck come in yesterday morning.
Super foggy. As soon as that fog started to break.
That property, though. Yeah. I mean, how many potential big bucks?
Well, and here's a good one, and I want to get into this with Steve, and this kind of goes back to the bucks traveling and seeing new bucks. So this property's a couple thousand acres, but really the huntable section that we monitor is no more than 400, I would say. And of that, it's probably really 250 of huntable because the rest is open pasture and mowed areas. And it's right outside Columbus, Ohio. I mean, it's primo place. But I've got 4 cell cams running on it. They've got another, half dozen to a dozen cams running as well. The amount of deer that this is now, John's now 1, 2, 3, 4. They've killed 4 bucks in 2 weeks. They should have killed 5 or 6 probably. If you count my experience with that 200, we should have killed 7. Of those bucks, though, I only knew 2 of them.
Just showing up.
These other bucks I've never seen. We don't have on camera. Like this buck that John killed, never. I don't think I've ever seen that deer. You know, and so it's like, where are these deer coming through? And into that point, man, what a great example of don't overhunt your cameras. Because if I was purely going on what my cameras were telling me, there's one deer and it's a 200-inch deer that I'm trying to kill. There's no other shooters in the area. Just as a point of reference for scrapes, I was looking at that tuning fork scrape that was just on fire all of October. Last buck that I had hit that scrape was 11.3. See, and I've seen scrapes this week open back up. Have you? Mm-hmm. Interesting. That were closed previous.
What I'm seeing right now is if you got does working the scrape, seems like the bucks are working them too. But if there's not doe activity at the scrape, seems like the bucks are just walking right by them.
I think that's probably
that in mind too.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of does. In fact, on Union, maybe last night, there was a 2 or 3-year-old buck hitting that scrape. Right behind him, a doe hit that scrape. Right behind her, like another 2-year-old hit that scrape.
Oh yeah,
yeah. And so maybe I should know this as a biologist, but I don't. Like, it would be so critical to understand that process of 48 to 96 hours prior to her going hot, right? You know, like that behavior of hitting a scrape. Like I've seen does hit scrapes in September. It doesn't mean she's going into estrus, but at this point, is that an indicator that she's trying to communicate like, hey, I'm about to be, ready and available? Like you just don't know.
I think it is. I also think a lot of does right before they come into heat, and I know the heat part is more of a shorter window, but I think there's days ahead of time when she knows she's about to get ready, and because all of a sudden I'll just see a doe really start working a scrape, that's on camera intel, and then bucks just start pounding it. And then that area seems to turn on, So I do believe that. I'm not saying it always happens, but I think that's a time when there is some kind of communication between bucks and does, and that's what they look for with scraping and knowing when a doe is coming into heat.
I think based on that, and I have a tough time hunting over scents. I don't have it down. I know guys can do it, but I just haven't quite figured it out. I think based on we're gonna spend a week out there regardless, I think we should take some Astros, some mature doe, and dump them in those scrapes in front of us, and just see. Yeah. Seems like those deer out where we're at they cover a lot of ground.
Do we have to use synthetics in Illinois because it's a CWD state?
Oh, we're gonna use buck fever.
Oh yeah, the red moon. Yep. Mature doe blind.
Yep. And I think that might help.
I think that one of the things that I've looked at and it's really funny because we always talk about bucks rut. And I think, Steve, you're one of the guys that I've talked to that really hones in on the doe aspect of it, and I think that's super smart. One of the things that I've kind of watched from the doe side is I've seen, bucks, especially young bucks, nudging adult does, or how does are behaving around their fawns. And those days leading up to them, let's say, being receptive, you really see behavior changes in them. Oftentimes trying to push off their fawns, or really not necessarily acknowledging or defending themselves or running off a young buck like they normally do before they're receptive. And then really it's that, and I was just lecturing these guys on it because somebody said, well, how did you know like that doe was hot? And frankly, just like a buck, a doe becomes really, really stupid when she's like in peak
she acts goofy too.
And I've actually killed, I want to say it was 2016 here up on the mountain here in Pennsylvania. It was like 4:00, and I had, remember that real wide one I killed up on Jason's? I had a buck doed up, and I essentially at one point was calling at the buck, and I'm like, this isn't working. And I started working on the doe and trying to get her attention and try to intrigue her more. And damned if she didn't pull him right through my shooting lane at 10 yards. And that buck 100% knew I was in the tree. 100%. He had pegged me. He had circled me downwind. He had looked at me 3 or 4 different times. And yet still, when it all said and done, she stayed 45, 50 minutes right next to me at 10 yards. He wasn't going to leave her, and he pulled himself right through that hole and got shot. And and that even after I shot, I remember taking a video and being like, thank you to this doe right here. She's just sitting there looking at me like, whatever. Like, he's off my butt, you know? And it's just, the deer are literally out of their minds at that time of the year. And it's not just the bucks. Everybody thinks like, man, like, you know, that doe's probably an estrus. Her tail's up. She's doing this. If you watch a doe in estrus, she is as dumb as a mature buck in estrus.
Yep.
You know, and sometimes,
dude, you see every year, you know, bucks walking down. Matter of fact, here's a picture of one. This is my cousin. This is in Meadville, Pennsylvania.
Oh yeah, strolling right there.
It's a big 145-inch 8-point strolling down the sidewalk.
Yep.
Any other time of year, you know, that deer's a ghost.
A ghost.
You know, but
caution to the wind.
Amazing.
For 3-4 weeks a year.
Amazing.
Yeah, so
if that, I think some big bucks really only lose their cool a week or two. Also,
it's crazy, man. Yeah. So I guess kind of going back into the doe aspect of it, you know, Steve, it in a year like this where, you know, you don't have those destination areas that are super reliable because of lack of acorns, or maybe areas have been browsed heavier because there aren't as much acorns. What's your strategy right now? I mean, what are you putting your guys on, you know, from a guiding standpoint, you know, especially in these big wood areas?
Yeah. I think the key right now, which, you know, I'm a little behind schedule because, like I said, I only got a few days left and I'm done guiding archery. But what I've noticed, and it's worked a little, but I wish we would have done it more, is I think you got to hunt more mobile this year. Like literally boots on the ground, maybe find a pocket of does. It seems like when you find does, you're finding a lot of fresh buck sign there, and just hunt it. And then when it dries up, you move. You got to kind of keep up with the deer versus usually we have a lot of set stands. You know, we'll find the food, you know, in the late summer, early fall. Usually I would already have a pretty good idea where the bedding was. So you were able to predict all that ahead of time. But this year with the lack of food, the deer they're in one place one day and maybe not even there the next. So I think that's the biggest key, is to be more of a mobile type hunter, and just do your best to stay on fresh activity, fresh sign, and just keep scouting, you know, as you're hunting. If things dry up, be ready to make a move quick.
Steve, how do you guys use terrain like during this time of the year? I know that once they really get going and bucks are covering ground, I'm a firm believer in using terrain, and every year it seems like there's a few spots that's going to pinch deer through there. And so whether they're on a doe or not, if you sit there long enough, you know, you're going to get a crack at one. In fact, I kind of think that spot in Illinois is exactly that. There may not be a buck held up on that property, but maybe once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, he's going to make that loop and he has to come through that bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. My favorite terrain feature that's often overlooked is a steep, long ravine on the side of a ridge. What happens is when bucks are cruising that ridge, they could be at the lower third, upper third, whatever. Rarely do they go through the ravine. What they'll usually do is once they hit the ravine, they cut up the side of it. It's almost like a ridge, and then they'll come around it right at the head of the ravine. And that's exactly where I killed my buck, and exactly what he did. He hit the ravine, then walked straight up it.
When you say
right
hit
at the top.
When you say hit the ravine, he came at it perpendicularly.
He was coming like. Okay, the ravine is on a hillside, straight up and down. So he was coming, you know, along the hillside. Once he came to the ravine, it was difficult for him to cross it. So then what he did was he cut up right towards me to where it flattens off at the top.
Yep.
And
that's where you were. That's like what you were having in Ohio. Same deal.
Same deal.
Yep. Yeah, you'll have activity coming up and down the ravine because it's almost like two ridges there. And then also, a lot of deer, especially if they're familiar with the area, they'll know ahead of time, okay, I already got to cut up, and I'll cut right around the top of that ravine. And often you'll find a massive community scrape right at the head of those ravines.
You understand what he's
That's
saying?
another thing that I was hunting. There's a big scrape there. And secondly was I did have a doe group just pounding that scrape in the day. Like every day those does were hitting it. And then that buck showed up like late October at night. But I knew, I was just like, I just put a few sits in here, I'm due to see him, and that's what happened.
Even better if at the top of that ravine, that woods is pinched in by a field edge. I think we're talking about the same thing. Yeah, so you got a 40, 50 yard span between a field edge and where the ravine cuts up on this hillside. That that's what you're talking about, right?
Yep.
Yeah, dude.
Exactly. It's probably one of the most overlooked. Like everyone, saddles, benches, points, ridges. But you don't hear a lot of, like, there's kind of hidden terrain features that I think get overlooked. And I never really figured it out until, a lot of my scouting. I'd always find massive community scrapes and a lot of big, especially like signpost rubs at the head of these ravines. And I'm like, I see what's going on here. It's a really good pinch point, especially if the deeper that ravine is and the further up and down the hill it goes, the better it is, because it's then starting to funnel the whole hillside movement. If it's just a small ravine, deer are going to get around it in different places.
So an interesting piece of that is the property in Southern Ohio is on the east side has several like ditches and ravines running from west to east, with the eastern end basically ending right at my property line before it goes into public.
At the food plot, right?
So coming up from the food plot to the east.
Okay.
And there's 4 or 5 of them that come out of there. Every head there is where I've marked big giant scrapes sitting right at the head of those things.
Yep, there you go.
And
that's
I think
exactly what I see here.
And that's why I almost look at it. And Steve said the other thing that I've seen on at least this property is I don't even know what you would call them, the points that I guess are coming out that kind of form these ravines. If at the end of that point, which in this case would be above that tillable ground, is real thick, every one of them had a buck bed on it. Like every one of those points had a buck bed overlooking those ravines, westerly, kind of in their face, and then they're working back up those ravines and circling around.
Are those westernly facing knobs, or they should be eastern, right?
They're facing to the west.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, see that? I wouldn't expect that. I would expect the opposite.
Facing from the east.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure there's
because you're thinking of them would want the wind blowing up over top and down, you're saying.
Yeah. I think
because the wind normally comes from the west, is that what you're saying?
Right.
I'm wondering if some of these deer aren't because I think predominantly it's a southwest wind at that farm, especially the way it runs up that ditch, that tillable ground. And so when they're sitting on that point, even though it's facing west, it's cutting right across their face.
Yeah. A lot of times it's hard to understand why bucks will, until you go out and you just drop some milkweed and you're like, oh yeah, it's just circling in here.
And it very well might be on those points.
Yeah.
So
and when you brought up circling, see, like especially in the mountains where I hunt, I always talk about it's very hard to predict the wind, but in ravines or like at the head of a valley, the wind almost is always switching. And a lot of people think that a buck wants to bed where there's just one decent wind. And I swear, I think it's the complete opposite up here. I think they like switching wind, like
me too.
Every 5-10 minutes, a different direction. Then he's getting a whiff from hundreds of yards away all the time, in different areas. And I truly think that that's what they prefer. And it's almost impossible for anything to sneak it on a deer in that kind of spot, because he's going to probably have a good visual advantage, and eventually he's going to get the scent of whatever's coming after him.
Okay, I got to talk about this because of that. I completely agree. And most of the big bucks that I've jumped on, hilly country like this, has been in bottoms.
Mm-hmm.
They're bedding in bottoms where ridges come together and stuff, where that wind will swirl. Mm-hmm. I also think that those make some of the best hunting spots.
Sure.
It's tough. It can be really tough because the wind obviously is swirling in there. That's why the bucks like it. But if you can find a primary ridge that cuts up out of a ravine with other ditches feeding down into it, it seems like you can find a spot like that with a safe wind that the bucks they want to be low. In my experience, like in my part of Ohio, they want to be not on the ridges necessarily, in the low part of the ditch. They're going to walk right up it, and the winds, thermals are falling down into it, and they can smell everything. But at some point, that ravine essentially ends and cuts up onto, we call it a hogback.
Mm-hmm.
And those can be some great stand locations. In fact, I killed the Spaniard on one of those.
So do you think, I guess I asked this to both of you guys, do you think that there's a particular time of day, like I guess you talk about those low spots and like catching that wind, I would assume that that would be a stronger path of travel in an afternoon or evening when that thermal's kind of pulling it down in there versus in the morning they may want to be on a ridge when it's rising up through there. What do you think, Steve?
If you want my opinion, to me, I've had better luck like in the evening. And when I see them get out of their bed is usually in the evening, I'll notice the wind will just die down, but then you'll start to feel that thermal pull.
Yep.
And it really seems like that triggers movement. As soon as that wind dies, those thermals drop, then those bucks start moving down in those areas even more, kind of with the thermals on their back. And, it's almost like it triggers movement.
Do you see, and I'm sure it varies from different parts, especially where Jared's talking about like East Central Ohio to where you're at, but do you see more of these mature bucks bedding in higher spots and moving into low spots or vice versa?
This year, way more high bedding. Last year, the bedding shifted. There was a lot more lower bedding, but it was super dry, which I think especially all the does were down in the bottoms, which they wanted to be real close to water.
Mm-hmm.
But this year is completely different. In fact, even late October, when things just started to change, the only daytime pictures I could get were way up high in the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's starting to change. Once November came, I mean,
they pulled down.
I'm getting pictures at any elevation right now. So
I think that's an interesting piece. Just understanding travel and pathways, and
we got a buck hit at our place.
Oh, who did?
Pastor Don.
Oh, great.
No blood or arrow. Shot it an hour ago. We'll see.
Good. I think it's interesting because, and again, I'm mainly because my brain's most fresh on the Southern Ohio piece, but I'd walk the perimeter mainly because I was just trying to see if there's anybody like pressed up against me. Is there any tracks, or is there any trash, any tree stands, all that. And of course, just the way that this property lays out, the entire property line is pretty much a giant ridge, right? Which is really cool because it falls off on both sides. There's some real thick areas. There's obviously tillable in the bottom. And there's some real tight, whether you want to call them hogbacks or saddles on these ridges where it just, it pinches down. And it's like, this is a place to, if these bucks are running the ridge, this is where you're going to kill them. But I think it's interesting because I saw a ton of buck sign, a lot of fresh buck sign in that. And I did see some down in the bottoms, but I don't know if it's a year-to-year variation because there wasn't a ton of acorns up there versus a year that there's a ton of acorns and maybe there's more does up on that top and the does are down in the bottom this year. But I thought it was interesting to see how those deer, those buck sign especially, were working the terrain, in particular those points, because I'm with you. I would have figured if those points were west to east, those would be the premier buck point. And there maybe some of the bigger ones are.
Sure.
But the amount of buck sign I saw on those points going out from east to west was substantial. And clearly they're like, okay, there's a buck, maybe it's not a shooter, but there's a buck laying at this end here. Like it's rubbed, here's all the droppings. It's thick, it's nasty. He's looking down over this thing. So,
yep.
I think that those bucks probably want to have some sort of regiment to it. In fact, where that tornado had come through on that top, you could clearly see just like a cattle trail that would have been essentially on the south or
downwind side of
it. Yeah, and just multiple scrapes right on the edges of that damn thing.
Yep.
And so I'm sure you sit there and those bucks are just cruising and just catching that wind straight out of that 2+ acre, jungle.
Yeah.
But I think what's neat about it is that I've seen bucks behave differently. I've seen certain mature bucks, in fact, this deer right here, who bedded always high, never low, always high, but he would come down into that bottom, particularly in the evening when those thermals started to drop. But in the mornings,
exactly.
Some of these bucks that I've seen, I only see them high. I never see them in the bottoms coming down. And I don't know if that's because thermals are coming up and they've got a better opportunity to catch that wind and utilize it to their advantage or what. The mysteries of big bucks.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I've always seemed to me like they would follow the thermals. I've watched, it seems like in the mornings they follow the thermals up, and in the evenings they follow them down. I mean, I've heard other people say they almost see the opposite, but that's what I've seen here is, and if I'm going to hunt real low, it's generally in the mornings. I'll find more activity down low till, maybe like 10 a.m. in a bottom. But then it seems like, especially once you get past 10, 11, and all throughout the afternoon until right before dark, all the activity is usually up high.
Interesting.
I've got a question for this group. Steve, are you pretty knowledgeable on thermals and how those work?
A little bit. I mean, you can ask me, we'll see what happens.
Me too. Yeah, just kind of. I understand the concept. What kind of a situation has to occur for thermals to rise in the evening?
In the evening? I'll tell you what.
You guys have seen that, right? And those are like the best nights.
I think just my jump in here is typically that's when you have those big fronts coming through and that the ground is warmer than the air temperature.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And wind direction, sometimes, those. Whenever, if you have a front though, and the wind starts kicking up, it's almost like then thermals don't play that much of a part, because the winds, to me, the wind starts to take over that thermal current.
No doubt.
Yep, exactly. So, but yeah, that does seem sometimes even right after a front, you'll see an abnormal thermal shift too. Once the wind dies down, then seems like sometimes the thermals will do a little bit opposite of what you're thinking. But I also still think, I don't know if I've noticed the deer movement to change a whole lot when that happens. It seems like just naturally seems like most deer here want to start heading low in the evenings and want to start heading high, working their way up the ridge in the morning. I think that's what I've seen all my life.
Yeah, there's a general rule that you can apply, which is, bed high, feed low.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that.
Probably has something to do with thermals and line of sight. And
I think the way that I've always interpreted thermals and it's easy to kind of see it when it's like a really nice crisp morning, that sun comes up and you see kind of that like just steam kind of starting to drift. But the where you see it a lot more common is like on a lake, right? When the water temperature is warmer than the air temperature, and like right at dusk you'll see that kind of steam and that thermal kind of coming up off of it.
So what type of a weather pattern are you looking for that's going to create warm ground and cold air, which if that's just what's creating,
I would assume like the front that we've got coming through now.
Yeah, so like now the ground is somewhat warm-ish.
For sure.
And then when
it's definitely warm.
Yeah.
And then when the temperature drops, the earth has not cooled.
Correct.
Yet, and so it's pushing
the
air away from it, I suppose.
I think it's the displacement of heat, and
so that works to our benefit then, because it does seem to correlate with good cold weather fronts, high pressure, low temp. The day that I killed this buck and the day before, dropping milkweed out of the stand, and like you said, Steve, when it was windy, it was just going in the direction of the wind. Well, when the wind would stop, it would kind of float off and just go up.
Yeah, and I think that's where, like, if we look at this big front, we're supposed to get a big rain front tonight, right? And so tomorrow is supposed to be sunny and like 50 or so. I bet it's a pretty stable.
It's the aftermath of the front.
Yeah, it's then the next day when it goes to like high of 40, that ground is still warm, hasn't cooled. And so I bet you see almost all day a constant thermal rise all day from the moment the sun comes up in the morning till it goes down at night. I bet it's still it could be one of those ones where I've dropped them before and that damn thing like literally hovers because it's such a balance fighting on that side.
Use milkweed, Steve?
Nope, I don't.
Dude.
I'm one of those guys that probably does everything completely different than most other people.
What do you use for wind?
Just real small pieces of yarn, like on my bow or on my pack. I don't really, my mind's kind of made up, a lot of times where I'm going to hunt, and I don't usually move, even though I'm a mobile hunter. I don't usually make a move based on thermals.
Me neither. Me neither.
Yep.
I mean, dude, I'm dropping milkweed to learn, just to understand for future hunt. Yeah.
To learn an area.
Yeah, dude. Once I'm in, I'm not getting down. Like,
Yep.
You know, at that point,
90,
my excuse is, hey, you can still get lucky.
Yep. Nope. 90% of the time, though, you know, in a spot, I feel the thermals do the same thing. They always do, though. Like, I feel the thermals rise in the morning, and I feel the thermals drop in the evening until, like you guys said, though, there's, you know, certain weather fronts do seem to play a factor in that. But generally, I'll still hunt those locations, though.
See, so something that I've like gained from that is like, if I can understand the weather patterns that give me a rising thermal condition, I'll push into an area with the wrong wind, knowing I can get away with it.
Well, we're there, man. I mean,
that's a good point.
We are. I am tilting on the. It's time to get aggressive.
Yeah,
like I've been super conservative in how I've hunted, where I've hunted, when I've hunted.
Yep.
At this point, no pun intended, throw it to the wind.
Yeah,
I'm about to go deep.
Yeah, and at this point, we may get aggressive no matter the wind.
Yeah.
But obviously, you know, you got smelled the other day.
Oh man, what a and here's a classic example.
Not to kick you. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, and we're in between. Like this week has just been just a nasty weather front for anybody to hunt, just the way it was. But I was literally hunting a northeast wind, which is about as dependable as a wet paper bag. Yep. And you know,
you mean southwest? Yeah, you mean southwest.
Yeah.
When it's calling for northeast, it's a southwest.
Yeah. And so I'm, you know, it's actually not too bad, right? It's at northeast, and I was planning. I mean, everything should have come, you know, from essentially the upwind side, right? I mean, that's what I was hunting. That's how this stand is set. And like, just as like I would expect, like the freaking way I walk into this stand, I look and here's this 145, 150 inch 8-point, you know, just casually walking, you know, kind of just cruising through. And it's like, I'm gonna kill that deer. And like, it's about the time I stand up and I'm ready. I could just feel that wind hitting right on the back of my neck. And I'm like, you gotta be shitting me, you know? And of course, as soon as he got in line with me at about 80 yards, he locked up. You know, and he kind of turned. I gave him a grunt, and the game was already over at that point. But, you know, and he didn't booger out. He just kind of, I'm going back the way I came. And, like, you know, I immediately did this video on our Instagram on the story and, like, pull it out, and my milkweed just sucks right down to him. And it's like 10 minutes before that, you know, I could pull it in, it would have thrown it right over my left shoulder. And no matter which way he would have came, unless he came directly behind me, I would have killed him. And, you know, it's one of those things that as I get older and hunt more, you know, when I was younger, I didn't even pay attention to that stuff. But we talked about it this morning, like how many big bucks did we not even see because he caught our wind 200 yards away out of sight?
Oh, sure. That happens
I think it's a lot more than we think. I think
absolutely.
I think for every one you see, at least 6 have done that.
Yeah. And you just don't even know it. You know, and so it gets back to that. I mean, there's still a big aspect of luck and how this thing sets up. But, you know, when he's in sight like that, if that wind is coming anywhere near him in his direction, yeah, you're in trouble. You know, the game is over. The fact that you're not going to beat his nose, you know, and at that point. And, you know, I almost thought that 200 caught me 2 nights ago, and that it was coming northwest wind. So it was a little bit towards that direction, but I kept hearing him grunting and moving. So I don't think he was. I think he was pretty focused on that doe. But just the same, you know, he may have caught something, and that's why he didn't come up and circle around her, thus giving me a shot.
Makes you wonder how you can ever kill these things. Like with as good as I'm serious.
It's a lot of things aligning, man.
It seems impossible until it doesn't, until you kill one. Dude, the night that I killed this thing and the night before, I genuinely, and you could probably tell from like my text and my attitude, I was like, it could happen. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of that had to do with my thermals pulling up. I just had that confidence. I was like, they're in here and they're not going to smell me.
Well, I mean, I will say,
and that's what it takes to kill them.
I will say, based on like my hunting history, I have killed more mature bucks in the morning than I have the evening. Yeah. And I think a lot of it has to do with when thermals are rising, you have a much better advantage than if they're getting pulled down into an area that's deer level.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's a good point, because they're going way up into the air more.
And that can happen in the evening.
It can, but it's just rare because it's in tandem with a big front.
And understanding that, I think, is, you know,
so like
pretty critical.
Obviously nobody's going to listen to this, but like at least where we're all at and where we're all hunting, front's coming through today. Tomorrow's very getting stabled. Saturday, which would be the 13th of November, will be the day that I think you will have thermals rising all day. And
maybe the following two, I bet.
Mark my word, though, we talked about this morning, Kentucky, Missouri, Indiana, Wisconsin, all of those have gun openers on Saturday.
Oh, wow.
I think you're going to see a lot of big bucks fall to guns on Saturday because it's a perfect storm setup.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, and
mark that.
Hey, go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to say, this year to me seems like more of a trickle rut, and you get like these little good spurts of it, and some of it's based on weather. But I do think, you know, even though I liked last week, but as far as November, this is the best weather system we've seen, and I bet you the biggest rutting activity is in the next, 4 or 5 days ahead.
Great, because I have all my tags.
Yeah, we got a pocket full of tags. Yeah. Hey, what do you guys think about rattling this time of year?
Oh, that's a good one. I'll let Steve answer first.
Yeah, well, you're probably talking to the wrong guy, because up here,
you don't do any.
I probably don't do it enough. I have the worst luck rattling.
Really?
If you want to talk about grunting,
yeah,
phenomenal luck running.
Sure.
Like the night before I shot my buck, let's see, I grunted.
Which was what day, Steve?
What's that?
What day did you kill?
I killed Saturday, so that would be November 6th.
6th.
But on the 5th, I saw 5 bucks that sit, and I know for sure probably 4 of them definitely came into blind grunting, but 3 of them, I kid you not, in all a 5-minute stretch, I had 3 different bucks coming from different directions. 2 of them start fighting in front of me, and it was all the grunting. Now, the most mature one came in downwind, and I would have shot him though. He's probably in the low 120s. I just never really got a shot. And by the time he did get my wind, he spooked. But then the buck that I shot, I know also came into blind grunting the next morning, because I grunted and he must have only been probably a couple 100 yards away, and I could hear you guys I think we've talked about before, you're familiar with like beech trees or beech brush.
Yep.
Like the beech brush or the little beech brush right now still has all its leaves, and I could just hear a tree just thrashing like down below me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that was a buck that heard my grunt, and he came in, all pissed off, ears back, hair standing up. But blind grunting for me, I've had way more luck blind grunting than when I see a buck out there and you're like, he's not coming in, you do those desperation grunts.
Yeah.
9 out of 10 times, I can't kill a buck doing that.
I agree.
He'll like look in my direction and he doesn't see the other deer, and or he might come towards you a little. But now the blind grunting is a gamble. I know that I'm probably losing some deer too.
Yep.
But it's still bringing deer in my direction versus that deer could have been going the opposite direction until he heard me.
What kind of grunting are you doing? So when you're blind grunting, what kind of grunts are those?
I do like a series 4 or 5 grunts, not like real long tending grunts, but not short grunts, just kind of like a brr, brr. And I grunt as loud as I can without making it sound like a duck, though. If you grunt too hard,
you got the wrong kind of tube. We got to send him one. You got to get a Magnum buck roar, dude.
The tube.
Really?
It's the one, man.
What are you...
I've been using the Quaker Boy growler, and that's been really good.
That's
too.
A good call too. Not many people know about the Quaker Boys though. Just us PA boys mainly.
Yep. I used to work for Quaker Boy actually, so that's why I'm a little bit of a Quaker Boy fan.
Yeah.
But no, man, I kid you not. And I know in other places grunting and even blind grunting doesn't work, but the deer up here, because I think even rattling and calling, it's different all throughout the country. Some places rattling works phenomenal. Some places even bleeding's better. I just think, all that I've tried, it just seems like grunting up here, blind grunting is the ticket for bringing deer in.
Agree. That's what I've killed a large portion of my mature bucks by blind grunting. I've killed maybe one of those deer by grunting at him after seeing him, and that would have been that Kansas buck over here. I knew, but he was just a bully, and so I snort wheezed him in. You know, I knew he responded to the grunts and was snort wheezing, and I figured if I could get him to really get out of his mind, he would have drawn through, and he did. But the majority of the deer that I kill are via blind grunting. I have rattled some bucks. So to your point, your question, I did rattle this weekend several times and have a single deer come in, but other guys banged them, and within 10 minutes we're shooting deer.
Really?
Absolutely.
Most of them midday. I don't know if that matters.
Well, it might be when they're not on does as much too, midday, and they're looking a little bit more.
Well, so
one thing too.
Yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
If you got I'm sure you got listeners that hunt the mountains. I don't think you can over grunt in the mountains because there's different. The way the ridges flow and the terrain. Sure. I don't think the sound is always carrying to a deer as good.
Yeah, the acoustics
if he's down over the
completely
hill,
different.
He's not going to hear you as well. And plus, the range of these bucks this time of year is in 5 minutes, that deer could easily go from hearing range to out of hearing range. So like I literally grunt at least every 5 minutes.
Wow.
And I mean, if somebody was sitting near me, they're probably like, what in the heck is that guy doing?
This is the guy that I'm used to.
Some Yenser's grunting the whole time up in there.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, I've had so much success doing it that I can't get away from it.
That's funny,
It'd be different
man.
if nothing was showing up.
I mean, the fact that you're telling me that you've got bucks on camera moving 4 to 6 miles, like that these deer are covering some serious ground, and so you're right. I mean, just as easily as you could potentially spook something with grunting so much or giving your position away. You've got to at least get in the game on them in some cases. And I do, people laugh at it, but like I kind of relate it when you're hunting in these hills and hollers and stuff, like turkey hunting. Like if you ever are in the woods in the spring and you hear a bird gobble, you're like, where the hell was that? Because it basically refracts off of all these different terrain features, or if the woods are thick in in an area. I mean, that sound is absorbed so fast. So, I mean, you've got so many different factors there to when you're listening. Like, even with that giant buck coming in on me, last week, I heard it and I'm like, was that a grunt? I heard it again. I'm like, it was. Where the hell is he, though? And he was 80 yards away, but it was in a ravine coming down. And so, like, I had no idea. Like, I'm freaking out, like, where is he until you see him. Then you're like, oh, there he is.
Yeah. Even, I think Colton and I have been in a stand together. We hear something and like I look this way and he looks that way. I'm like, it's over here. He's like, I think it's over here.
Yeah. No, so it's a good point. It is funny, man, because like, I do the same thing with turkey con. Like I'll be walking through public ground or something and somebody's sitting there just, cranking on the box call every 2 minutes. I'm like, come on, bro, seriously. But from a grunt standpoint and an alertness standpoint, if the bucks are truly on their feet that much, it's about the only way you're going to pull or at least potentially get their attention when you're talking about blind calling, which I love. I'm a huge proponent of blind calling. I've had a lot of success that way. I know other guys that won't touch a call until they see a deer.
Yep. And another thing too, I'll recommend is the weather and wind plays a huge effect in grunting. Like last week, I mean, I grunted a ton and I really wasn't having a lot of success until later in the week when the weather was more steady. When you get like a lot of wind, I just don't think the sound carries enough. But we had like 3 mornings in a row where we just had steady temperatures. It's like, high 20s, low 30s. And it was like you could hear a pin drop out there. And, you'd let out those grunts and you could hear it bouncing off ridges. And it just seemed like it really traveled. And those are the most ideal conditions to get a buck to hear you. So if you're out there in 30-mile-an-hour winds grunting, don't expect to have the same results in certain other days.
That first week of November was special this year. You can just tell.
God.
Yeah, you can just tell when it's on, and it isn't
the
always.
Weather lined up just right.
That's what I mean.
Yep. I mean, and it was one of those things that you knew it was going to bust loose because traditionally, man, I really bank on that October 23rd to 27th time frame.
Exactly.
And it was
dead.
Here. It was dead.
Dead. Scary dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, is it ever going to happen? Feeling like, are you kidding me? Is there a rut this year or not?
Well, and I guess my worry was, because of just the way the feeding situation was with acorns and stuff off, I'm like, holy shit, like, did I miss it? Like, are my cameras in the wrong spot? Like, because that's what I need, some sort of indication to say, it's time to go. It's time to sit. And frankly, it just wasn't there.
Yeah, wait till you guys see our at the end of the year, because I can already see a lot of the results now. Our trail cam data survey as far as daytime buck movement. It's so unbelievable. It's like hardly anything, and then November 1st comes, and it's just crazy. Cameras are on fire.
Yep.
So I mean, the cameras don't lie. That's one of the best ways to to record that kind of information.
And it seemed pretty good till probably right around the 6th or 7th when you killed your buck, and then it kind of fell back off again now.
It's dying off.
And I think
it is dying off.
I think again, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it's gonna.
Yeah. Well, I just want to make it known that if we kill a buck in Illinois, I'm taking credit.
Sure, I'll let you take credit for it.
It'll be because of this decision to back out and come back when the weather's right.
Yeah, it would have been a tough
You
one.
you made a good decision. You definitely
The
did.
only thing that we have to deal with in Illinois is that Friday starts gun season. So I don't know how many guys are going to come in from a public aspect Wednesday, Thursday, start scouting, putting up camp, whatever. Yep. So hopefully we're tagged out by them. But yeah, it'll be on .com.
On .com.
Yeah, I think the other thing too, Steve, that I really was curious about is, you were talking about being mobile, and obviously as an outfitter, that's tough. Because
oh my God, so tough.
So I guess just tell us, like, how are you doing that, or how are you working with that with your guys? Are they going with you when you're scouting these areas? Are you out running and gunning and you're like, boom, this is a spot, hang one, and be like, okay, we're changing the game tomorrow?
Well, it used to be. The biggest problem this year is we're lacking like consistent spots. Like normally, like I said, you find the food, you have a good idea where the bedding is. You set up stands month or two in advance. This year, because it's constantly changing, I mean, we only have usually we have about 50 stands.
Mm-hmm.
This year, I bet you we have 15 good stands. And really at this point, they're getting to be about all burnt out. If you are seeing deer, the mature bucks they're skirting around them, and then so most guys come into a group, and it's so hard, especially like most guys do a 3-day hunt, to just get everyone always readjusting, reorganized. Like we really weren't set up for a year like this. I know that we've killed some good deer recently, but if I had more mobile hunters, which next year I've already made up my decision, you're going to have to be mobile, or unfortunately, not being mean, but I really think you're wasting your time here. And we also want to, normally we'll have like reflective tacks and ribbons, for the routes. Next year, we're just going to use our Spartan Forge app, and we'll have the trail marked out. They'll have to get the app, but we just give you the pin and the trail, and you go.
Dude,
and
that's so valuable,
you got
Steve. So valuable.
You got your climber, whatever. And plus, it's just less intrusion. You can be in a stand somewhere. I can find something hot. Bam! I throw you the pin, throw you the route, say, get out of your stand, pack up, and set up here. Like that's what we normally we haven't had a year where we really had to do that. But knowing that we're going to probably have that gypsy moth problem again next year, no acorns, I'm just planning ahead. And I really think though, even in years when there is a good acorn crop and things are a little easier, I still think that's the better way, because you can always have stands that die, or you might find something better. And it's going to make the work a lot less for us. Like I don't have to be walking 4 or 5 guys to and from their stand some days. I give you the pin and the route, and it's on you then. So that's what I think you got to do. Be mobile.
Yeah.
We
use the hunt stand, like the track feature, and so Corey was able to get to his stand that way. But we also put some night eyes out on the way.
Yeah.
And he told me that he was getting out the first night, and he's like following this trail, and he gets up to one of these night eyes, and he's like pulls it out of the tree, and it's not ours.
Oh, that happens to us too. Trust me.
Yeah.
That's luckily, I've walked so many of the trails, and I'll find other people's trails. Usually what I do is I'll put two tacks or, night eyes up, say, just follow the ones that you see too. But, then you're eating up a lot of tacks that way as well. So we definitely got to get, like I said, we're not doing bad. Obviously we killed another big one this morning. I think our overall number though is going to be way down this year, but, you learn from years like this. And, I really do think, these learning years, really, you're better to learn than to have some success and think you're doing everything right. So, it's going to make us better. Not that, like I said, I'm not complaining. I'm super happy, especially in the past 24 hours. I think we've killed, 2 bucks over 140. So
I was going to say,
I'm happy with that.
I saw one posted last night that looked like a pretty good stud.
Yep, exactly. And then the one this morning, that big freak buck, I mean, that's probably another 140 class deer. And then I killed the big one, on Saturday, and we have a few days left. We've got a couple other small ones, but, and another thing, not to make excuses, but I've only had maybe 2 weeks, not even, of real good hunting. We did the last 2 weeks of October, and it just was completely dead. So I'm not complaining though. We still had a great year.
I think it's amazing, Steve. When you start to optimistically, you can look at, oh man, I've got 50 tree stands. I've got a whole season. I've got 10 bucks on camera that I would shoot. And then you start to sift through that as the season gets going, and you're like, oh, well, actually, I've only probably got, let's call it 12 to 15 days of really high quality weather stuff.
Yep.
Bucks move off, and they're, they change their patterns. Maybe only 3 or 4 of those things end up hanging out. And then, depending on weather and wind on a given day, that stand could fluctuate from 50 stands to 6, or whatever.
Absolutely.
And it all comes down to all of those things lining up, and then you still have to get lucky, and that buck has to come in and do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
How hard it really is to kill these things is.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yep. Not to be a pessimist about it, but a realist.
Oh, and like I said, if you've never, done guiding or outfitting, people think it's like you just put someone in a stand and they kill one, but they got to have skill too. The most important thing is their mental attitude, and especially in big woods like that guy, Gerald there. He came the last week, October, hunted hard too. He wasn't one of those guys that just hunted a little bit. He never saw a deer, but yet he wanted to come back. Yep. Then he comes back. Yesterday is his first day. Kills that deer in 20 minutes on his first sit.
That's awesome.
But that's the kind of attitude you have to have, like that grinding, determined attitude, and trusting in your outfitter, and knowing that, okay, the deer are here, I just got to put my time in.
Yeah.
And he hit it at a bad time. I kept telling him and the group of guys, I said, guys, I'm telling you, this is just an unusual year. I said, even myself, I'm not seeing anything either. And hold on a second. And I was just happy at least a couple of them came back, and it paid off.
Yeah. I got to believe, other than, mobility and just ability to execute when the time comes, attitude has to be the biggest thing you're looking for out of clients and hunters.
Absolutely. Yep. And I had a guy, last year, if you don't have faith in your guide, there's no sense me guiding you.
Yep.
And one guy, everywhere I took him, there was always a complaint. And I mean, fortunately, this rarely ever happens, but I just, towards the end of the hunt, I said, I'll finish it out with you. And I said, but in a nice way, I said, I don't think you're meant to be guided. Like a guided hunt.
You're not unguidable.
You're asking me. And I mean, I'm not saying I'm the best guide or the best hunter, but if you are going to have me guide you, I need you to go with the plan here. I've worked hard to try to get you in a good spot and to have a good plan. And if you're not going to follow it, we're both wasting our time.
100%.
So you got to have people that trust in you. And like I said, there's so many variables. I get guys, hey, Steve, it's too cold today. I think I'm going to pass, or it's a little drizzly rain. I mean, I understand if it's like a hurricane out there, but
get your ass out there.
Some people's effort. Yeah. I mean, I don't care if you're guided or not. If you're not hunting hard, the less time you're in the stand, the less chances you're going to get. So
for sure,
it's way harder to guide than what most people think, but
hard to believe that happens on a 3-day hunt too. It's like, dude, you got 3 days, just hunt.
3 days. Yep. And that's what most people choose because it's cheaper. And, I do feel, my hunts are fairly reasonable. So people think, for $875, I can go do a 3-day hunt, and they know the deer, the big deer here, for that price. But I don't think they realize, I don't even care what part of the country you're going in 3 days, it's really difficult. and it's hard to make an adjustment. Like everything I planned for, could easily change, but to readjust in 3 days and get everyone's reset up, it's just very difficult. So
have you had a beat on some of the let's say antler size bigger bucks that you have had in years past this year, or does that also seem to be a little bit off?
No, actually I think this year I've had a good beat, and even all the big ones that we've taken, it wasn't like we didn't know where they were. We were like, even the buck I shot, I intentionally went in to kill that deer, and I'm making it sound easier than what it is. I mean, I'm sure there was some luck involved, but that was the deer I killed. These other ones we've got this week, we kind of knew they were there. We've been seeing a lot of our target deer too, but getting them in bow range is another story, or we've had some misses. Last week we had a guy hit a big one we never found. So I do feel like we've done really well. This is probably our best year ever, though, of staying on some of these bigger deer. And I think a lot of that too is just a lot of off-season scouting and just learning some of these areas better and what these deer have been doing. So no, like I said, we haven't killed a ton, but at least we're getting some big deer.
I'll be interested to talk to you again, Steve, in like January timeframe, January, February.
Yeah.
I think, maybe I've looked at some of the wrong stuff in the past, or even when we've got out in the summer and stuff. It's hard to put yourself in this November state of mind in those times of years to just really know what you should be looking for.
Yep.
Because you can be like, oh, there's a food source. Because you have to acknowledge, October and late season. There's other parts of the season. But really, this right now is probably the time of year it makes the most sense to scout for. What are those terrain features that I should be looking for? What are the does doing this time of year? So I'll be looking forward to that conversation.
I think that's a good point. Hey. I mean, that's one. Don't get me wrong. Like, I love October. I love November. That February, even in early March timeframe, is one of my favorite times to be in the woods, because it is bare bones. You're reading sign as clear as day at that point. And really, some of the sign that you see, like, that's where I'm looking on the ground. I mean, obviously I'm looking for sheds, but I'm looking for big buck tracks in January and February, because that's my indication that there's something next year that's probably of interest to me.
Yeah.
Yep. And another thing that I look for, just a little small feature that I really think makes a difference, is if you're not seeing shavings on a rub, it's usually an early season rub. But if you're seeing those shavings on top of the leaves still, that's probably rut sign, because that's after leaf off. And that seemed to has really helped, like finding some bigger deer and where they rut, because you can tell that's all late rubbing, and which is, they're only mainly rubbing when they're in rut. So for rut sign, that's a real key thing to lean, to focus on.
Interesting. That's a good point. I guess in terms of, and we'll kind of use this as a wrap up point, but I'd like to get your take on this. When we talk about rubs, we talk about scrapes, obviously just mentioning that shavings on top of leaves for rut sign on a rub. Obviously, it's easy to tell like a scrape's fresh or not at this time of the year. Do you think, do you hold water to one of those more than the other in terms of, hey, I've got like here's an old, old logging road, and there's 10 scrapes on this thing, versus, here's a big rub here, here's a big rub there. Is there one of the two that you put more weight in November? And then even looking forward to next year, if you're walking through an area in January and you're like, well, it's a good rub, but man, look at all these scrapes. Like, do either one of those, I guess, hold your attention more?
Yep. I mean, what I usually find, and I touched on a little bit earlier, is where I'm finding a lot of rut sign right now is usually where there's a good concentration of does. And then you might find there's also maybe a little bit of sign, not as much, but you might find like a little bit of a signpost rub line in between a couple pockets of does. But the most sign I'm seeing is all really doe related. And I really don't see, I don't even see those bucks using those specific locations outside of the rut. But that's why I said, like, I think it's really important to be able to figure, is this rut sign or was this pre-rut or early rut sign? It's like, because I do have some spots that are producing, again, like they have in other years. And like a week or two ago, there was no scrapes, there's no rubs in there, but I was seeing does. And then now that's just shredded up. And that's what those bucks do. Even like the buck the guy shot last night, it was just next to a doe. The guy said it was ripping up trees. And they don't just do that, for other bucks, but I think there's some maybe showing off, or something for the showing off for the ladies a little bit too. But those big concentrations of sign you see right now are generally areas where they're like rut areas, and they can sometimes be good the next year as long as the does stay consistent. I always say, I think the biggest key in the rut is knowing what your does are doing. But sometimes though, it seems like does tend to be a little less, maybe I would say vulnerable. They'll go into areas where bucks don't feel as safe and secure.
Yeah.
And it seems like in those areas, the bucks will stay back a little bit and just kind of scent check the trails that the does are using. But if you can find those more secure staging areas, and that the does, especially doe bedding, if you can find consistent doe bedding every year, you'll probably find some real good sign in there. And in my opinion, that's probably the best place to hunt the rut and kill a mature buck right now.
Where I was going with that is that, we've been talking about, as we're looking at properties to hunt, lease, buy, whatever, there's and it goes back to your scouting in July question. Like, cool, we saw 1 in 60 class 10 point at the head of that holler in Illinois in a bean field, and it's like, that's a big buck, like, let's get on them. Haven't seen that damn deer since. And so it's one of those things that, and I'm sure he's in the area somewhere, but like, as I've been looking at our leases, or even the property in Southern Ohio, my own properties, I'm like, what kind of buck sign am I seeing from the last week of October to now? Am I seeing fresh scrapes, or am I not? Am I seeing fresh rubs, or am I not? And it's mainly because like, I want those deer there in the summertime. I want to be able to be influential.
Where are you talking about exactly? That buck that we saw where I'm hunting?
Well, yeah, in Union.
Yeah.
So like, again, we see buck sign back there where you're hunting, but we saw that big buck in the bean field up front when we were driving. Haven't seen that deer.
Right.
And it's just, it comes down to what you and I've been talking about, is the right property. And to where I don't know if I really care if I see that buck there in the summer, as long as he's there at the end of October and into November.
Yeah.
Sure.
Agreed. I think that spot specifically is even different from Hobart's, the other lease. These are, and I said this to Colton when we were staying, those seem like big woods mountain bucks. There's a lot of big open woods that's not holding them in one spot. I'll bet if I kill a buck out of that spot, he may have been 5 miles away.
Yeah, we may have never have seen him.
Yep, I think they just know how those hills lay, and they have spots that they go through, and I think that is one of them. But the fact that there's there are some rubs and scrapes and stuff down there, probably from that 3-year-old we've been seeing. I don't think that's the deer I'm going to kill in that spot. I think he's going to come from a long way away.
Well, and I think it comes down in different topics here, but like, as we're looking at property, like even the place I just got in Southern Ohio, the cool thing that I was encouraged about is there was a lot of fresh buck sign on that place as of 2 days ago, which tells me that historically there's probably bucks using that area during October, November, which is what I care about.
Yeah.
If I can keep them there, or if I can influence them to be there in, July, August, September, awesome. Or if I can feed them in January, February, March, probably even more important. But the fact that there is buck sign on that property now, and it's active, and I mean, it was fresh as can be, is my encouragement that they're there now, and hopefully if I can improve the property, they'll continue to be there, maybe be there even more.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of places that we've looked, and no knock on it. Like, I love the Kentucky lease that we have. It's big woods, mountains, very much what Steve's hunting in his area. I mean, just big bluffs and big timber. There isn't shit for buck sign. Very few, and it's just mainly in the bottom in the food plot, because I think they're there checking does. But all those big ridges, all where I expected big rubs and big scrapes, there's no big bucks right now.
It's because the deer aren't. I don't think you're really having clusters of deer activity. It's more spread out.
That's it.
When they start to cluster in areas, that's when you're going to see a lot of sign.
Yep.
But that's just my point. Like, if you have good doe groups though, and that will draw a lot of bucks into that area, that's where you'll also see good buck sign.
Can't kill them if they aren't there. How many times have we said that?
Well, dude, just every property is so different. There's.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about all the places that we've hunted this year.
Well, and not to call it out, dude, but I think of your family farm of where it's in September and even the first week or two of October. I'm like, dude, this is the best. I said it to you. I'm like, this is the best hunting year I think you guys have had on that property in terms of number of shooter bucks. And then like that, gone.
Nothing. Gone.
Dead.
Well, and it's interesting that it's like almost a direct contrast to what Steve is saying he's seeing up there is that I've got does. I've got cameras on food plots that have 5-6 does in them every night. I haven't seen a shooter buck in there in 3 weeks at this point.
Insane, man.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
However,
here though, it would be different here though, because we have so few does and less deer. Like,
I think that's
here
the key.
it's just find does, you'll find bucks. But I think when you have higher doe populations, it's just different too.
We do.
At least that's my guess.
They don't have to work. And they can only cover so many does.
Well, here's my theory too. I don't think that those 2-year-olds are I don't think they can breed everything that's there. And we have good food.
You think they'll recycle?
I'll bet, after Thanksgiving, those big bucks, and we'll have a rut probably through December because I have so many does and I have the food.
Classic big farmland type
Those bucks
areas
that are left will come back.
Yep. And you'll have a good crack at them late season, and they'll be working hard for those bucks.
I think
for
so.
those does.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, listen, man, we know you got guys in camp.
Sure.
We wish them the best of luck here the rest of the week in the hunt. And as always, man, awesome to have you on and enlighten us on these deer. You truly share the same passion that Jared and I have for this mission in life, really. And like Jared said, I think we get you back on here in that early winter time period because as much as I hate to say it, it'll come up fast, but we're going to be switching our minds to next season, really. Just like
Absolutely,
that.
Guys.
Just like that.
It's been just as much fun, if not more, talking to you again. You guys are awesome to talk to, and I really appreciate you having me.
Well, we appreciate it, dude.
We just freaking love doing it, dude. That's why it's so easy to talk because there's just unlimited topics,
Well, we'll definitely pull you back in, man. Again, best of luck, and also to you next week if you're up in New York hunting, or even if you're just getting ready for gun season. Just be safe and have fun, man.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, dude. Well, that was awesome.
Yeah. Yep. Cool shirt.
Representing.
I got to get one of those.
Representing the old Sherk's Guide Service. Well, I mean, it's just cool because, again, when you talk to the guys, whether it's Steve or Bill or Dan or whoever, when you share a passion, when you start talking and it's just like, yeah, we're on the same page here. It just makes it so much better.
Yeah.
And I mean, it blows through a podcast of 2 hours, in no time. But I really, two things. Number one, Steve's bashful about it, but dude, he's running like 140 cameras and covering essentially like a couple 100,000 acres.
Yeah, that dude's committed.
And per even your experience that you guys just had this weekend on public, like it's not all roses.
No.
Like I'm sure he works really hard for some deer that ultimately, because it's public, somebody else busts and blows out.
Yeah.
He's
not running like a couple 1,000-acre operation in Iowa. It's, and those guys do work too, but I mean, this is some work.
Yeah,
and
he's like, oh yeah, no acorns, we have no food. These deer move 4 miles.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, how do you hunt that?
It's a tough gig.
Yeah, and I mean, but he loves it. And you can tell
Obviously,
he lives for that. So when he has a guy this morning and last night kill bucks, and he's like, that's why. That's why I do it.
Yeah.
So, again, I don't know. It's Thanksgiving week, I think, if people are listening to this podcast, which means Pennsylvania and Ohio's gun seasons are about to open up. One thing I wanted to mention, and we talked about it with Dan, and I think it's still got some steam, is we'll do it probably next week, although it won't be as classy, is that'll be kind of our Illinois deer camp, is, me, you, Colton, and Corey.
And a hotel.
And a hotel room.
Yeah.
Again, it's not like as what some people would have, but I'd love to see what people's camps are. I'm going to have kind of a mini camp with Emily and Harlan and Carter down in Kentucky this weekend, so I'll take some pictures and do some posts and stuff at our cabin, but this new Ohio place, we've got this it's like a cinder block metal roof, but it's got beds, bathroom, running water, kitchen. Like, we got a camp.
Where are you doing it with the kids?
At the Kentucky cabin.
Kentucky. Okay.
Yeah, gun season Sunday or
Gotcha.
Saturday.
All right.
So I'm prepping tomorrow. Saturday we hunt. And dude, so many bucks down there. Nothing like that I'm real excited to shoot myself, but like for them or for Emily,
they got to be jacked.
Dude, we've got like bucks everywhere. So as long as that holds with this front, we should be good. But yeah, I mean, I think that so we've got Kentucky gun, we've got Illinois before you listen to this. I
think we're looking at some all-day sets too. Not to scary Colton. I think we're going to sit.
And I'm trying to contain the excitement of buying an Ohio farm as well.
Yeah, dude. Like, that'll be a journey.
Just super stoked. And, just to get started, man, you and I both have, and I think Steve does too, but we've got a real hands-on mindset. And so this place has got a lot of improvements that can happen. I mean, dude, I've got 7 tillable acres in this bottom that has never been planted. And it's like, yes, plant that. Check, number 1. Yeah. Like, plant this. If you plant it, they will come.
You can pave the way for me because I've never bought property, but I want to.
Well, and I'd love to hear from everyone else. It's funny because like I mentioned it. I don't know where I mentioned it, honestly. Maybe just in the Instagram story, and like instantly we got several messages about like, hey, I've been trying to buy land. Is this too small? I want to do so. I think the people have spoken, and we should do our side podcast. I've just called it "I'm Buying a Farm." Like, that's what it's called. I'm Buying a Farm podcast, which is part of HUNTR. Mm-hmm. And it's, I think, just you and I in our kind of journey here to buying investment farms and hunting them and enjoying them.
For sure.
But you can't fall in love with it. That's the key. Which I needed you by my side a couple of times because I was like,
I was there in spirit.
I was like, that service to call Jared.
I was there in spirit. I was probably when you called me, I was like, well, this is the problem. Here's the bad thing.
Yep, which is good. That grounds me. Yeah. It also helped me get it for $15,000 less than I wanted.
Coon hunter, huh? Mm-hmm. Ooh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I negotiated it down below where I was willing to pay. Which was
awesome.
Good.
I can't believe they just said yes.
Well, and again, there's some huge. Yeah, me either, dude. I was literally pulling into the like Columbus city limits, and I was on the phone with Emily, and we were going through, and her and I had broken this down. Which obviously anybody that's thinking about buying it, make sure your spouse is on board. And so we were cool with everything that we did. And I was like, yeah, I want 15 under what I thought because that's my starting point. And I literally was saying that, and I get a text from the agent, and he's like, hey, are you willing to cover closing costs? Which in most cases the buyer does anyways. I was like, yeah, no problem. I'll cover closing costs. He's like, good, it's done. I was like done. Like he accepted.
I submitted the offer.
And he's like, no. He, as long as you're paying closing costs, done. He accepts. I'm like,
there you go.
I bought a farm?
Bought a farm.
Yeah. So it was pretty cool. So I'm excited about it. And I think that'll be something, especially as we get into January and stuff, because I don't officially close until January, is, we'll take you guys through kind of not only the purchase of the farm, but how I'm thinking about it from an investment side. I think you're probably not too far to starting that process as well. And it's not to be like, oh, yeah, look at us, we can go buy farms. I think we've had the discussion around the leases, and I still think there's value in leases in a lot of different cases. But I'm excited to kind of get into this financial aspect of it from a purchase standpoint and investment. And again, the first property you buy is probably not going to check every one of your boxes. Like, do I think I can grow big deer here? Probably. But do I think I can grow this? I don't know. Yeah. Probably not. But maybe.
Yeah, it's going to be a journey, man. I mean, we got 3 to 5 years to make it an awesome deer hunting property and
enjoy it.
Yeah, whatever else comes out of that. But, ultimately, we'll sell it to one of you listeners.
Yeah. Look me up in 3 to 5 years.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be a cool story to go through. And, man, it was a little bit, it wasn't that I was rushed to do it, but, I was ready. I'd done the research. I knew where I wanted to be. I was financially sound to do it. And man, I just couldn't find the property.
It's like Bill said. I mean, at least you're in the game now. Like you have an investment property.
Yeah.
We can start to do this work, and I'm sure other properties will come up.
Yep.
And you'll have something to leverage for that. And I think that's just kind of
how these guys start it.
Just how it starts.
But I do think that one thing that we, both you and I, as well as our families, have really emphasized is we need to focus a bit. Yeah. And I like the focus of mine is because really I don't see myself buying land in Pennsylvania besides where my primary residence is, which I have 28 acres.
Yep.
But Kentucky property and now this Ohio property or this region that's my focus. Mm-hmm. For a lot of reasons, mainly
close to home.
Yep, close to home, but also hunting. Like those are the places that are probably the better of the hunting areas. You know, could I buy a land in Southern Illinois? Sure. Would I ever get there to do anything? No. It's just, that's the reality of it.
Yep.
So yeah, bought a farm.
Pretty sweet.
Well, we appreciate Steve Sherk coming on. Awesome as always. If you're a mobile hunter and you're thinking about trying to chase some big woods brutes, I'd look Steve up in early 22 because it sounds like he's going to have some openings. And frankly, I think the last time we talked to him, he said, like, I don't have openings. Like, I'm booked up. Yep. So, and shit, maybe you'll join us. Maybe it'll be a hunter camp. Come hunt with us?
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Is that if anybody wants to come hunt with Jared and I?
Yeah, it sounds like he's got maybe some time.
I think that would work.
We'll make it work.
Well, we appreciate you listening to episode 47 of HUNTR Podcast with Steve Sherk Jr. of Sherk's Guide Service, Pennsylvania, Big Mountain Bucks. It's still November. You're still grinding. Keep it up. It'll happen. Be patient. Be safe.
I'll have another one of these sitting by the time next time we're on here.
I hope so. All right, guys. We appreciate you listening. We'll see you next week.
Later.